In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front upper door hinge on this Toyota Camry. The same procedure can be used for the other doors as well as any other hinges that you have to replace. Let's get started. To do this procedure, we have to remove the door. The procedure may be slightly different for door removal depending on whether you're doing the front or the rear. I'm going to show you on the front driver's side door, but the procedure will be very similar on the rear. It's just a matter of the location of the electrical connectors. Speaking of electrical connectors, one of them will be for an airbag sensor, or a crash sensor that is, which is behind this door panel. Having said that, you don't want to unplug any of the airbag system with the battery still connected. So let's unplug the battery and let it sit for about an hour so that everything can discharge. The airbag system does have capacitors that remain charged so that they can go off in case of an emergency if the battery becomes disconnected. So let's disconnect it and let it sit to drain all capacitors. For this procedure, we have to disconnect the battery. I'm going to take the negative terminal off, take a 10mm wrench or socket and ratchet and loosen up this mounting nut on the terminal. Once you twist it a few turns, you should be able to pull this up and off. I'm going to clean this corrosion before we reinstall it, but set it aside to where it cannot make connection with the battery terminal. And if you have one of these insulators, I'm going to set it here so I can clean everything up before I put it back together. With the battery disconnected, this may sound ridiculous, but honking the horn and flashing the high beams can sometimes help discharge the capacitors faster. Also, touching the positive and negative terminals of the battery cables together with obviously no battery connected will also help discharge the capacitors faster. Let's remove this kick panel here. There's a retainer there that you can unscrew. It should not be very tight. If you need to get it with pliers or a screwdriver, go ahead. Once you unscrew it, it should fall right off. There it is. Keep that safe. And then you're going to want to pry kind of diagonal but outward on this piece. It has two push clips that secure it in. You can see one was right about there, the other one is right about here. All right, there we go. And now you can separate it down here. If your parking brake is engaged, disengage it. Obviously make sure it's safe to do so. Separate these two pieces. That can come off. This can stay here. And now these three connectors here are the ones for the door that we're after. Start with this larger one at the bottom, and then this one. And this is the airbag connector. The easiest way to unplug this airbag connector is to stick a flathead screwdriver through the back side, right where the two connectors meet. And you want to lift up on this part of the tab. That should disconnect. Now grab a 10mm socket and let's unbolt the door check from the A-pillar. This usually has thread locker on it, so if you're doing it by hand, it won't be super easy, but take that off. Be careful because now the door will swing a little bit further open. Now let's pull the harness out of the A-pillar. There we go. Now use a 12mm wrench or socket if you can fit one and remove the two lower hinge bolts to the door. They are pretty tight, so you'll need something with some decent leverage to begin. Don't get your tool stuck there. The reason I'm taking the lower one off first is so that the door can push into it and lean up against it even with these off. Careful at this point. The door is, as you can see, no longer connected to that bottom hinge. And do the same up top. I'm going to break both free, but I'm only going to fully remove the lower one for now. I'm going to leave that upper one for last. Careful of any pinch points. All right, one last bolt holding this door on, so be careful. At this point, have a plan. You want to make sure you have a place to put this door once it comes off. There it goes. To get this upper hinge off of the door, I'm just going to use a wrench and pull both of these bolts off. These are 12mm in size. This one actually, I might be able to fit a socket and ratchet. Yes, I can. Perfect. So if you can fit that, go ahead because you do have a little bit better leverage usually. Oh, there we go. Try not to scratch that fender too much. Oh, and it looks like as soon as I broke it free, it's starting to come off, which is great. There we go. Yep, no thread locker, so that makes things easier for us. And this one will definitely be a wrench job, 12 millimeter in size as well. Perfect. Oh, that's out. And there's the bolt. And there's your hinge. Take a rag and thoroughly clean all of this debris up here. I'm actually going to use some cleaning solution, some all-purpose cleaner, so I can get all of this sand and debris buildup out of there. I just sprayed some cleaner on my rag, and I'm just going to scrub this back and forth until it is as clean as it's ever going to be. Now, obviously, what you see here, this is the primer and the paint marks and everything left over from the factory. We do have some metal here, so I'm actually going to coat it with an anti-corrosive coating just in case it is not, and it looks like it is potentially starting to rust a little bit here. I would not want that to continue. And now I'm going to take the new hinge, try to slide this the further bolt in the hole first, just like that, and try to start it into its threads while I have this still moving around here. Well, maybe, actually, I'm going to put this bolt in now so that this stops moving around so I can grab onto the other bolt and actually start it into the threads. This is going to be the trickier part, but it just has to spin a few times to catch on that first thread. There we go. All right, I'm just going to bring it as far in as I can by hand, and then I'll wrench it the rest of the way. At this point, you're going to want to try to line it up the best you can. As you can see, there is a little bit of wiggle room, and yeah, sure, you could always do this later, but it's going to be a whole lot more difficult than if you were to do it now. I'm pretty sure that mine is as lined up as it'll be with how it was before. I'm going to give it a nice snug here with a long wrench so I can have some leverage. Perfect. All right, that feels pretty tight. So there you go. Now we can put the door back on. Now, with your helper helping you line up the door, line up the wiring harness and slide it through so that it can be started in here. And now, bring the door closer as you try to line up the hinges. I have my hardware ready to start it on as soon as the hinges line up. All right, I got one started. On the bottom, let's try and line up the top. There we go, lined up the top as well. So now I can let go and start in the other two bolts. All right, I got both of these bottom ones started, and since the top first one is started, I'm going to snug these because, well, with 3 out of the 4 in, well, the fourth one is definitely going to line up. I'm going to snug these up. Once they're snug with that wrench, I'm going to bring the longer ratchet in and just give them a little bit extra so that they can hold on tight here. There we go. Now let's move to the upper ones. I got this lower bolt started, so let's snug it up. That's bottomed out. Give it a little extra. And same with this top one. A little extra, and that's good right there. Let's get the door check reinstalled. Put that bolt through it. The bolt should still have thread locker on it. Leave it on. If you took it off, put new thread locker on. And snug it up. You can see that the wiring harness here is basically through the A-pillar, but the grommet is not seated. So we want to make sure that this grommet seats in the A-pillar with this lip on the boot here. So to do that, you're going to want to pull it through here, and you'll notice that it's going to want to pull into the pillar And this is going to be difficult to show you, but I'll show you the end result. As soon as you bottom it out with the grommet, just press that grommet through until it pops in. I'm holding pressure on this side so that it doesn't want to pop back out, and then feel around here to make sure it's sealed. This is what you want that grommet to look like at the end, on the A-pillar, glued right up against it, sealed up nice and tight. Let's get these electrical connectors plugged back in. I'll start with the airbag sensor because that was the last one we took off. To connect it, it's as easy as pushing it on until it clicks. Okay, you heard that click. It's very important to hear a click on these. Well, I mean on all of them, but especially on these very important connectors. And then there's this one, and then this one. When you put the kick panel on, make sure you still have these two retainers here, push pins that secure it on, and then that stud that you see on the carpet needs to go through that hole at the top, just like that. And then, well, you won't really be able to see where these go in, but you'll basically feel them want to fall into place. When they do, pop this on. I'm going to put this plug back on here. Just press that on, and then tap this trim piece back into place. Now let's close the door and make sure everything functions properly. It latches perfectly fine, and it opens perfectly fine. If it had trouble, or if it seems like it's not lined up, if the body lines are not even, or if for some reason it doesn't latch or unlatch smoothly, you're going to want to adjust the hinges that we just worked on to make it all work perfectly as it was before. Now take your negative battery terminal and connect it to the battery. Sometimes it can make a little spark. I cleaned up all the corrosion. I also got rid of that pad that's down there, and sometimes it's useful. Other times, if it was full of corrosion like mine was, it's actually worse off being there, so you're better off taking it off. Anyway, put this battery terminal back on in, make it nice and snug. Don't crush it down because it'll actually stretch this right here, and then you will have a hard time tightening it up in the future. As long as you can't spin it by hand like this, you're good to go. So this is tight enough. Keep in mind on some of these vehicles when you disconnect the battery, you may have to recalibrate the steering angle sensor, and that entails turning the steering wheel all the way to the left and then all the way to the right, and then centering it up so that the sensor can relearn its positions on both ends and in the center.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.